recognise a few faces on here, and I also don't recognise some of you either. So I'll kind of just explain that I stepped into her role for about a month just after lockdown happened. But I'm back at my own project now, which is based on George Bay. So basically Em asked me to come along and just kind of have a chat about what we do further down here, because we are quite similar, but you guys work over such a vast area, whereas I just work on a single reserve. I have created a little presentation. It's mainly just photos, but so I can kind of talk you through and you can kind of visualize what we do a little bit more. So can I share my screen, Em?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay, give me 1 sec. Right, can everybody see that? So this photo here is a nice picture over our reserve there, and kind of gives you an idea of the size of the reed beds we're restoring. So I'll just kind of quickly talk you through the project and the reserve. So we're a 3-year project now, and we're looking at restoring habitats, so woodland, meadow and reed beds over the 3 years, but we're also focusing on and continuing our ecological surveys, which were really successful. I keep saying last year, but last year didn't really exist, so it was 2019. So this is kind of just a map to show you the area that I'm working on me and my volunteers. So it's 185 hectares. It's just down the coast from Hawksley, if anybody knows that, and this is the country park here. So as you can see, we have quite a mix of habitats to work with. So we have arable farmland, which is tenanted. So over the next 3 years, we're going to discuss more with our tenant farmers about entering into environmental stewardship schemes, which obviously kind of controls a little bit more about what they do with the land. Some of the trusts fields that we kind of keep track of are already in environmental stewardship. We have 33 hectares of woodland, but these are mainly Scots pine, so fast growing conifers, straight lines with very little ecological value. And then we have our reed beds here, and as you can see, we have one very developed reed bed and one very undeveloped reed bed. So these are kind of the big part of the project, is trying to restore this reed bed here, because they're such a valuable habitat, and this site is thought to be the biggest complex of reed bed in the county. So as I was saying, we've got these 4 fields here are what we're looking at restoring into large blocks of wildflower meadow. So obviously you'll all be aware about the decline of pollinators and how most of our wildflower meadows now are just scattered and very well, tiny really, on verges of roads or roundabouts and things. So we're looking at creating really large blocks of meadow here. We are trying to restore some of our woodlands. So I was just explaining to Em that we've just finished some woodland management that we've kind of done over the last few months. The idea is we're going to try and open up the woodland and let more light into the floor, and that'll increase ground flora. We're looking at planting more native species. Obviously we want to keep Scots pine because they're great for red squirrels, but we have 33 hectares, so it doesn't matter if we take a little out and replace it with more diverse species such as willow, hazel and oak. And then the reed beds are going to be our toughest job. So we've actually had to get 2 new sluices put in, and they were both meant to happen this winter. We got one in, but the second one was apparently too wet to put a sluice in, which kind of baffles me since sluices are obviously a water control. So they are coming back at the end of August to do that one. But it means we've got one to play around with over the next year to kind of look at how best to control the water levels. And luckily it's on the reed bed that we're really trying to encourage reed growth. So this is just kind of the habitat stuff, and we're going to start and get volunteers really involved with this. So they've been planting, helping us seed our meadows. So they sowed 160 kilograms of seed over, I think, about 10 hectares maybe, and they've got another 12 to go in the next few months. We would have loved to have gotten them involved in the woodland, removing brush for us, because that's been such a chore to get done. And of course, we're going to get them to get their wellies on and help us start planting some more reeds up when we can in the summer. But kind of just to go, how do I? There we go. Just a few things that we did in 2019 in terms of more survey work, because I have more pictures of that than I do of what we did over the few months that we were allowed volunteers. And this is still going to be a main focus of the project, because without survey work, we have no idea if our habitat management is actually paying off and doing what it's meant to do. So I've pulled some pictures together. So the two top pictures here are actually to do with bats. So we had these lovely volunteers building us some bat boxes, which we've actually just put up on the reserve. So as I was explained about the woodlands, they're still quite young and there's not enough roosting spots for bats or any kind of viable roosting spots. So by installing bat boxes, we're hoping to attract them that way. Bat boxes can have an uptake of up to 5 years, but we're kind of hopeful it'll happen quicker with there being less natural roosting sites. Our volunteers helped us identify bat species out on several bat walks. So we took out, I can never remember the name of them. Like magenta bat detectors, which obviously allows us to see our oh, I don't know if you can see what's just popped up on my screen there, but never mind. So that allows us to hear the frequency of all of the bat noises, and then we can kind of compare that to what we know. I don't know why that keeps popping up. I don't know if you can see it. There we go. And then we also have a fancy bat detector, which we plug into a phone, and that actually lets us see the echolocation happening, and that also helps us identify it. So we identified soprano, pipistrelles and nocturals, and what we were surprised that we didn't have any debentons, and they're the bats that tend to hunt over water. So we've kind of started questioning, why isn't our habitat good enough for debenton bats? What we also noticed is they actually didn't come out till very, very late, almost practically when it was dark, and this is probably because they're commuting to the site to feed rather than just coming straight out of the roost sites. We had volunteers come and do water quality checks on all of our ponds. So we did a lot of pond dipping. We did, I don't know if my neat one, there we go. We also, with a somebody that holds a license for great crested newts, we did bottle trapping. So it's quite an unusual way of surveying for newts, but for some reason they're attracted to bottles and they'll swim up and then just kind of sit there until you find them in the morning. So it's completely harmless to them. That sounded so bad there. It's completely harmless to them, but obviously you need a license to handle them. So Duncan Hutt, who's head of conservation, comes out and helps us with that. We've actually just had 4 new ponds put in on East Chevington yesterday as part of a great crested newt scheme. So we'll be continuing the survey work throughout the next 3 years, and hopefully past the life of this project, to make sure that these habitats are viable for these protected species. Another much well-loved species that we have on the site is hedgehogs. So these were never really recorded until until 2019, which is great for the site, but now we need to figure out how we can help. I don't know if you've seen, it's like a 10th anniversary for Hedgehog Street, which is the People's Trust for Endangered Species. So if you like hedgehogs, or like me, are absolutely crazy about them, if you pop onto their website, they give you loads of ideas about how you can improve your gardens for hedgehogs. But anyway, we're looking at now improving our site for hedgehogs. So we built these tunnels, which basically have a track pad in. We use natural ink, so charcoal powder and vegetable oil, and we bait it with some hedgehog food. And the idea is they walk in, they step on the ink, and as they walk out, they leave these adorable little footprints. So it was really good when we found them. So we've been practicing this all over the site and have started kind of monitoring where they're going to feed, what in that area is working and what maybe isn't, and how can we replicate that throughout the site. So again, we're using the surveys to help us with habitat management. and just a quick little video. So we also camera trap a lot on site, but you can see this little guy having a look in. And what's funny is I kept the camera going for a few days after we took the trap out, and he kept coming back every night and like looking around, and he's like, where's my food gone? So you only keep them out for a certain amount of time, so they don't get used to kind of being fed. I was banging on about woodlands a little bit more before. So there was actually one woodland on East Chevington that's had some work done to it. So we kind of used this as a baseline for what our woodlands could be like. So volunteers spent quite a few days monitoring our fungi and also lichens, monitoring invertebrate communities that they found. We also did some small mammals in the woodlands, and then we compared it to one of our unmanaged ones, and the differences were absolutely incredible. The managed woodland had more small mammals, more evidence of birds of prey. We had a more diverse invertebrate community because of new ground flora coming up. The fungi were absolutely incredible. So this has kind of really motivated us to get as much woodland restoration done as possible over the next 3 years. And I just kind of mentioned mammal trapping. This was one of the favourite activities of volunteers, and it's really useful to help us kind of determine the health of our habitats as well. Unfortunately, despite them being very cute and fluffy, they are great prey for pretty much foxes. We've got birds of prey, marsh harriers, barn owls will scoop these up, weasels and stoats will take them. So if we have a healthy small mammal population, we know that we're probably going to have a bit more of a healthy larger mammal population. I'll turn that down, but this was a family of field voles, so there was a mum and 2 babies that snuck into one trap, and it was the cutest thing, and I always love showing this video because it kind of always gets the awe factor. And then another small mammal which we were amazing to discover was the harvest mice. So I don't know if anybody read the story, but it kind of blew up that after 15 years, harvest mice were rediscovered on East Chevington. So they were released as part of a PhD project. And we now have plans to release some more as part of an augmentation project. So we're hoping to increase the genetic diversity of the harvest mice on site. So this is a kind of a very good sign that our reed beds in this area are quite healthy, and kind of proves the point that we need to expand this habitat to expand this vulnerable species distribution. Wildflower meadows, I definitely learned a lot more doing this than I did at university. We used to sit on quite sunny days looking at one quadrat for hours on ends. I know some people had done this with me when I did a bit of coast care stuff, and this again will continue throughout the life of the project and hopefully after with monitoring programs, and that'll help us understand how our meadows are developing. So meadows take roughly 10 years to get to prime condition. So well after I'm gone, hopefully volunteers will still be up for monitoring this. And camera trapping I mentioned, I'm just going to show a few videos that we had. So we had an otter appear. Since then it's kind of a regular visitor on our cameras, and it's actually got 4 young this year, which is, I've been told, quite a large litter for otters. Normally it's 2 or 3, so we must be doing something right on site to be able to support such a huge population. We have high density of roe deer as well, so when we're planting new trees, we have to take into account that these guys will probably eat most of the ones we plant. So obviously we just keep an eye on that. We use special tree guards, which we make sure we would remove when the trees are strong enough to not be vulnerable to these little guys. And then another one of a water rail. So camera traps are really good to kind of monitor the more quieter species. So water rail are quite difficult to see. Again, using these to monitor how many we've got or whereabouts they're on site will influence the next 3 years of habitat management. But volunteers worked really hard in 2019. We gathered over 1,000 individual species records. I think there was 400 species identified overall, and 200 and something of those were new species for the site. So we're hoping to really build on these these species records over the next 3 years, and we're quite excited to see if anything else will be discovered on East Chevington. So the more the merrier. Obviously we've lost out a little bit over the past few months, but volunteers are eager to get going just in time for survey season, and then hopefully we'll have an understanding of what's going on in these habitats for us to then, in about September time, start to make a few changes to them. I kind of rattled through that because I don't like prattling on a lot. But if anybody is interested in the project, you can follow us on all of our social media. If you have any questions that you maybe think of later on, you can always email me at catchmydrift@northwt.org.uk. But yeah, so I can't really tell you much about what's going on kind of at the minute or what's happened over the past few months, because it really has just been me and my project trainee kind of cracking on with work. Rob's been out to help us with some woodland management, but we're really hoping that we can continue over the next 3 years and gather more volunteers and kind of keep everybody's interest in what we're doing. But it's a lot of work, as you can kind of hopefully see what we want to do. I have big kind of hopes for this project that it will succeed and that we will kind of get to the prime habitat that we'd like. So yeah, sorry I rattled through that, but kind of wanted a bit more time for possibly more discussion than me just kind of keep talking and talking and talking. So yeah.
Thanks, Sophie. That was really good. I just I spotlighted you so everyone could see you. So let me stop doing that. Okay. Has anyone got any questions for Sophie? Barbara, you're always first up, Barbara.
Not. No, I was just wondering, Sophie, have you got any water voles?
We actually carried out a survey in September before we kind of started putting our sluices in, and unfortunately there was no signs of water voles, which made me very sad. It's definitely possibly a site that could support them in the future, and it would be interesting for the trust to kind of look a little bit more into that area. But I'm not sure if water voles are even in that catchment, so unless they're hiding, unfortunately we've not spotted any yet, as much as I'd love to.
Thank you.
Joyce and Conrad, I think you were next.
Last year, Sophie, you got us really excited about the work that was going on with Catch My Drift. I'm just wondering if COVID controls permitting, any plans for guided tours of the site? We'd really like to have a look, particularly at the plants and the work that's going on there.
Yeah, I think the trust are slowly kind of putting together a plan of how we can ease back into volunteering and also back into events, but it's something we're hoping to offer to all volunteers around the join us for a walk, because nobody's kind of seen what we've been up to, and we're hoping kind of getting this funding have kind of caught people's interest a little bit more, so it's definitely something we're going to do. So I'll let Emma know and she can send it out to you guys to come along and see what we've been up to. We just need to check with the trust when that's going to be allowed.
That's great, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that'd be great. I want to come to that too. Robert, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi Sophie. I was just wondering, I read somewhere, it's a bit of a convoluted question, but I read somewhere that there were sluices being put in, and it's a bit of a race against time to try and control the water levels. Yeah. So seeing your otter video, I know they feed on frogs and eggs, but have you got fish in those ponds as well, or can you even get fish into them with the sluice gates?
So the South Lake, which is where we tend to see more signs of the otter, actually has a burn running into it. So it's the old Chevington burn. And we definitely have sticklebacks in there. It's something we've always kind of, I've always kind of looked into how we could, how you do fish surveys, but I think it would literally be quite difficult to do. But for the fact that we hold such a healthy otter population kind of gives us hope that we do actually have more than just frogs on offer for them. The North Lake, where the first sluice has gone in, that actually doesn't have any input. It's field drains going in, so I'm not actually sure what's in there. They are spotted quite regularly, so there must be something in, but unfortunately I wouldn't be able to tell you that in detail. But the sluices are to stop the water going out rather than to stop anything going in. So we're hoping to hold the water back and raise the water levels up. That'll destroy any scrub that's trying to get in. It'll also help against wave action as well. So we think that could be one factor of not getting reed beds developed. The reason we were kind of a race against time for this was because breed and bird surveys season's coming up, and as soon as they start to breed, that's it, we can't do any work. And it was really important to try and get at least one sluice done this year. So like I said, we can kind of understand how we should be managing our reed beds a little bit more. So one's in, it's risen the water level up really high, so it's done one job, hold the water in. Now the next step is to let the water out and hope that it leaves. So that's job number 2, see if the sluice does that. But yeah, so it's not holding water out of the sluices, it's actually holding it in, if that makes sense. So yeah, any fish that come down the Chevington burn can still get into our South Lake reed bed.
Yeah, it sounds like I remember when we were doing that survey at work with, you were worried that it was a bit difficult for you to coordinate between the raising of the water and the bird fraternity, but it sounds like you've got the balance right.
Yeah, I hope so. I've been discussing with a lot of the birders on site, and there's a huge book about this big and several RSPB reports on what to do with reed beds that I've read so much about it. I'm just constantly dreaming of reed beds. So yeah, it's we'll hopefully get to see that in action this year. And I was mentioning volunteers getting involved with their wellies. We've been looking at how we can actually plant reeds on our very shallow areas. So we've got shelves and then really deep pools, but in these shelves, can we get volunteers in with, we've looked at coir matting. So I don't know if you know that gets used for peat restoration, but some companies have started using that with kind of reed bed, reed shoots. So getting the fresh growth, digging it into the coir matting, and that gets pinned down. And what that'll hopefully do for if we do get any wind action, so the waves coming in, by it being pinned down, it hopefully won't harm the new shoots coming through. But that'll kind of be a bit of an experiment to see if that works. If not, we're just gonna dump a load of rhizomes in and just be like, please spread. So that's kind of what we've got planned in terms of the reed beds. But yeah, the sluices was a little bit of a stressful 2 weeks, but it's in and it looks good. So fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Everyone's quiet. Is there anything that Sophie's talked about that we haven't done that you guys would like to have a go at?
Yeah, why don't we have ponds in coast care? I mean, I know we've got ponds in the dune slacks, but there's nothing in that really. But I mean, do we do any work with ponds anywhere else?
Well, obviously we can't promise anything because Sophie has a little bit of an easier time in that she's on her one reserve and they have more control over that reserve than we do over the whole of the AONB. We have to work with different organisations and landowners and things. But it's something we could definitely look into. I'm sure Rob would be quite keen to do that. We did put the pond in at I think it was before you joined us at the primary school in Sea Houses. But I think that's the only thing we've ever really done with ponds.
I think there's been a pond at Howick, and there's
that's true.
There's
yeah,
the pond
that was this time last year. Yeah,
Alnmouth as well. There's a pond there, so there are a couple of.
Yeah, we have done bits and bobs in.
I do remember now. Wasn't Becky in a photograph where she was dripping wet, standing beside a pond one day?
Oh, that was. Were you there, Sophie? Or was that after you left? We had a team day.
It was. I chucked it down. It was horrific.
Oh yeah, it was right before you left, wasn't it? It was a team day at RAF Boomer. It was all of the staff team, and it chucked it down for the entire day. It was hailing sideways at one point.
Hopefully next week. I've been doing a bit of filming at our ponds for those who can't kind of get out and frog watch. And we've got some good footage already of frogs mating and things. So I'll be putting together a bit of a string of videos. So if you can't get out to look at ponds, hopefully that'll go on our social media next week. So gives you a view of what's going on from a frog's eye view, basically.
Mandy's got her hand up.
Hi, I was just putting my hand up to say I'd like to do more survey work if possible, pond dipping, trapping and things like that. I don't know how much we can do in our area really, but I'd certainly like to get involved in that if we could.
Okay.
The pond at Howick, I'm not sure the pond at Howick has much in it. I've been keeping an eye on it really, but I haven't seen much life really yet.
Oh, that'd be cool to go and do something there. Well, obviously, I'm not going to be here, so I can't promise anything. But yeah, these are all ideas that I can pass on. See what Rob and Elaine can make of them.
What about? I know we don't have many ponds, but we do have a lot of burns. Any plans to look at what's alive in those? I mean, it might help somebody like Sophie if you realise what's in the burn further up it. Give you a better idea of what's coming into your ponds as well, maybe.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I think it could be a separate thing to work with landowners further up the catchment for farm pollution and things like that. But we do a few things on our burn, and if you do get somebody who'd be happy to do some survey work, water shrew work on burns is always good. It depends how interested you are at looking at poo, because that's what it involves. But it's good fun. But yeah, I think something that I think the Rivers Trust and things are looking more at catchment and pollution. So landowner permission further up would be quite an interesting one to do.
Yeah, that
oh, sorry, Rob, go on.
Oh no, I was just going to say that just reminded me that must be a bit of a worry because there are websites where you can see in Northumberland the pollution, the runoff pollution. So have you got protection for that? The stuff that is coming into your pond, have you got a way?
Actually, reed beds are basically the best cleansers for things like that. They are what they use in sewage treatment plants and everything to clean the water. So we are quite lucky that we have a nice big buffer of that. But I think I'm trying to remember, there was water level, what with water quality done in 2019. And I think there was a slightly high level of phosphates, which is possibly due to just general farm runoff. It wasn't anything too worrying, but it's definitely something that we need to look at in the future, because if it gets worse, it's not ideal when we're trying to protect a reed bed. But yeah, that was done. The one with our general farm runoff, I think the phosphate levels weren't too bad, if I'm stand corrected.
Yeah, we've got a bid in with the Environment Agency at the minute, Rob, to do that very same thing, which is to employ someone to go and work with landowners further up in the catchment and identify areas where that phosphate level might be coming from, and then you would do a year's feasibility study, and then years 2 and 3 you would actually put the action in to stop that from happening, so we don't get such high phosphate levels in East Edmonton. So we're just waiting to hear whether that's been successful or not. I did chase them last week because it's obviously getting near the end of the financial year and we still haven't heard anything. So we'll just have to wait and see. But it would be really good if that came off, because that was one of the things when we put the bid into lottery. We said, yes, we're just working on our reserve, but we also want to branch out and work with landowners nearby to try and fix some of the problems that we know we've got.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, there is a lot of data. Northumberland Water, I mean, I was surprised how much, well, I suppose I should be not too naive about how much they actually record there, but there is quite a lot of data as a baseline. So if you could get that, it'd be excellent, wouldn't it? To be able to link into that and then complete that project. It'd be very interesting to see what the upriver farms are doing, or the effect they're having anyway.
Mm-hmm. Joyce and Conrad, did you have a hand up? Oh, you're on mute.
Yep. No, I was just wondering whether or not there has been less disturbance on the site, and if there has been less disturbance, if there's any evidence of whether or not that's that whole thing about what effect disturbance has on particularly wildlife populations.
So unfortunately, I have very little idea of what went on the reserve when COVID was kind of happening. Obviously I couldn't travel and I was on furlough. But the site has very limited access as it is, in terms of there's very few public footpaths. The hides are quite far back, which is good, but also a little bit of a hindrance when you're trying to please some angry birders. As far as I'm aware, there was kind of nothing reported in terms of difference of sightings, but it is a site which you can't really venture off path. A lot of it's hedged or fenced. So yeah, but because I wasn't around during COVID to see the less footfall, I was unaware if anything kind of changed.
Because there are a couple of Joyce and I went a year or so ago. There are a couple of marked paths, aren't there, through the pine woods?
Yeah.
You know that track that makes the southern border? Aren't there a couple of signed? And are they public rights of way, or are they just nature walks, so to speak?
There's a public right of way, and then there's a bit of a desire line. But in that woodland, it's still one that kind of needs opened up a bit. So the wildlife in there is limited as it is, but we get a ton of deer near there. There's always signs of feeding squirrels. We get foxes close by as well. We've caught them all on camera. So, but like I said, the footfall still isn't massive at East Chevington. But there's enough, that woodland's big enough that if there is a footpath and some people are walking through it, the wildlife can still kind of be further away than what you expect.
Because certainly the beach and the coastal strip there last summer had a tremendous amount of people on it. Yeah. We cycled up there a couple of times, and it was absolutely heaving. But I suppose you're right. The reserve, so to speak, is difficult to see. It's difficult to access, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we do want to do is improve that access. So we still want to make the site accessible for nature, but we've been very careful of kind of keeping the access exactly the same as where it is. We're just improving it and making it more wheelchair friendly. But in terms of adding new paths or anything in that, we decided with the ecologists we were working with in 2019 that wouldn't exactly be a good idea, because we just wanted to try and keep it as less disturbed as possible. But even going along that coastal path, when there's a lot of people there, you'd be surprised at what's kind of lurking behind in those fields. I mean, there's stoats constantly hanging around there. We tend to see foxes and deer in that area as well. So they kind of get used to where it's busy and where it isn't. And if they don't like the busyness, they move away from that area, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
Mandy, is that a new hand up, or is that
from
your last question? Okay, off you go.
I just wanted to ask about the marsh harriers. I understand you have marsh harriers on the site, Sophie. Do you know, do they nest there? Do you do any kind of monitoring of the nesting?
Yeah, so we have a local ringer from the Northumberland ringing group who does a constant effort study on East Chevington. So I don't know if anybody knows much about constant effort studies, but it involves kind of returning to the same site, using the same rides every so often and recording the birds. And this gives us a huge picture of kind of what's happening year on year. Are birds returning? Are we seeing less adults, less juveniles? What kind of health condition they're in? And unfortunately, last year was, my uncle does one at Hawksley, and I think it was the first year in a hell of a long time where he's not been able to do it. So there's a bit of a gap. But anyway, we have somebody who comes and does that on East Chevington, and he actually is licensed to ring marsh harriers. So obviously nest locations and everything are kept to basically nobody knows except for him, but he goes and rings them, so he keeps track of how many nests there are, how many chicks, eggs, how many fledged, and last year was the first year that 2 nests successfully fledged at least 1 chick. So they're kind of, they sometimes have a backup nest or 1 fails, so it tends to be 1 male provides for 2 females, and he kind of picks his favorite, if that makes sense, and her chicks tend to succeed better. But obviously this young male that we had was a good enough hunter to support 2 nests, and it's the same, one of the same females returning every year because she has a dodgy leg, which is how you can tell. But yeah, so they're monitored and kind of seeing the improvements. But if reed beds expand, I mean, me and Elaine and Anthony went to Norfolk to discuss reed beds there, and they were just like pigeons. They were just everywhere because the huge expansive reed bed. So I know we'll never be that size, but imagine how many nests it might support if that reed bed was a little bit bigger. Could you get a marsh harrier with 3 nests on? But also, for anybody who is interested, a white-tailed sea eagle was spotted on East Chevington last Friday. A juvenile. I'd literally gotten back to the office when somebody spotted it. But the marsh harriers are back as well. We spotted those out and about flying. So fingers crossed that they'll fledge another 2 nests again this year.
Brilliant, thank you.
Do you think the marsh harriers would see off anything like a sea eagle, Sophie?
I don't think so.
Eagle would sort them out. Oh, dear.
Sea eagles are the largest bird of prey. They're bigger than a golden eagle, obviously on its way to Scotland. But no, I think the sea eagle would see off.
Would win that fight.
Would win that fight, definitely. But yeah, it would have been amazing to see, though I probably wouldn't have had a clue what I was looking at. I was probably just think that's a big marsh harrier. But yeah. I don't know. There's also talk about ospreys. So when ospreys are up and down migrating along the coastline, I don't know if any of you have ever had the pleasure of meeting Brian Little at some point or have heard about his name, but he was always kind of a bit of a cheerleader for trying to get osprey pools put up Durridge Bay, which I think is always an interesting idea. But that's something for the birding community, but it's something to be, if people are interested in birds, to be aware of, that it's always a possibility that something like that can happen.
Sophie, do you have any marsh warblers?
Give me 1 second. I have the recent ringing report. I will quickly check. I don't think so, but I don't want to say.
That'd be amazing if you could get some breeding marsh warblers eventually.
Normally I file things away really neatly, but apparently. So Ian, who does all of our ringing, sends us a report every year. We get a lot of bearded tits at the minute, and it's they've definitely been breeding quite a bit recently. I mean, he's not rung any over the past year or so, so I'll be interested to check the actual bird atlas for you and let you know.
Oh, I should do that. I've got it next to me. Do my own research, shouldn't I?
But yeah, if anybody's interested in bearded tits, East Chevington's quite a good site to see them at.
Anyone else got questions? Everyone happy? Cool. Oh, Barbara's got a hand up.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just thank you for a really nice presentation, Sophie. I didn't meet you in your when you were in post at Course Care, and like Joyce and Con